And I'd just like to briefly introduce our two interlocutors. Tim Lilburn, as you probably know, is a renowned Canadian poet and essayist who's been awarded numerous literary awards. For example, in 2017, the European Medal for Poetry and Art, the Homer. He's also received the Governor General's Award, the Canadian Authors Association Award, the Saskatchewan Book of the Year Award, and most recently, the Cheryl and Henry Kloppenberg Award for Literary Excellence. He's also been made a member of the Royal Society of Canada, where he is acknowledged as, quote, one of the world's leading poets and essayists on poetics. His works have been translated into a number of languages, and I was particularly delighted to hear that he had played a recent role in the translation of Chinese poet Zhuao Ci's wonderful collection, In a Flash of Lightning, 54 Poems of Cosmic Vision. Tim's work has included the contemplative focus for many years, not surprising since he earned a master's degree in philosophy from Gonzaga University, going on to do his doctoral work at McMaster University, and he was also a member of the Jesuit order for several years. He currently lives in the Bowker Creek area of the Wasanich Territories on Vancouver Island and teaches at the University of Victoria. In recent works, he has brought a contemplative focus to environmental issues, especially climate change, and our responses to it. His most recent volume, Numinous Seditions, Interiority and Climate Change, has been called a profound exploration of the inner dispositions necessary to navigate the challenges posed by climate change. It draws from a number of contemplative traditions and from the works of folks like Jan Zawicki, Gillian Rose, Dorothy Day, and Simone Weil. Among other things, like Jan Zawicki, he explores the sadness attending our rapidly changing environmental landscapes. Cary Campbell is, as Jeannie mentioned, a member of the Faculty of Education at Simon Fraser University, and he is, if I may say, a brilliant educational theorist, and a researcher, a music educator, and a tireless community organizer. Informed by biosemiotic, post-digital, and post-humanist theory, as well as land, place-based pedagogy, his research addresses the nexus of educational problems posed by mass digitization, climate change, and the broader challenges of cultivating place consciousness in today's globalized and hyper-capitalist society. Furthermore, Cary's a performing and recording musician, interested in music learning and cognition research, and is committed to creative music pedagogy, as well as inventive arts-based research inquiry more generally. He collaborates with teachers, artists, and community members to create curriculum responses and digital tools that connect people and students with their own localities, communities, and public spheres. Cary and Tim have known each other for almost 10 years, since the publication of Tim's Contemplation in Place in 2017. Tim's articulation of, quote, this new sadness in Numinous Seditions is an important cornerstone of Cary's new book, out in April, Education in a Time of Social and Environmental Unravelling. In the book, there is an interview chapter with Tim, along with a chapter featuring Hisun Bai, Susanna Vasco, and some of the other usual suspects. Mm-hmm. Tim, Cary, we're delighted to have you both with us. Cary, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Charles. It was such a lovely introduction, and yeah, it feels weird having my name right next to my bio right next to Tim's there. Fewer awards overall, and fewer books. This is the first book, so thank you, Tim.
You're just starting.
I'm just starting. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Thank you, Tim. And yeah, no, Tim, it's been so lovely to get to know you over these past years through sharing reviews and reading your books, and even attending seminars at your house with Jen Zicki and other things. You've been such a great mentor from afar. Not too far across the sea, but thank you all the same. So I won't say too much at the start here. Just I know Tim has 6 sort of practices, enabling practices that you brought to the table here for discussion, and eventually we'll find our way through them, I think. And I'll just say before I pass it off to you completely, and we can chat back and forth, of course, that yes, Charles is totally correct that in many ways my recent book of essays and interviews here is an educational response, a multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary educational response to what Tim has articulated as this new sadness confronting us in this time. I use other metaphors and heuristics to navigate this new sadness and what it might mean especially for education in this time. But really just articulating that, the basic idea of Numinous Seditions, that there is no antinomy between a practice of sadness and an engaged politics at a severe time of crisis like this one. So starting from a place where we make this acknowledgement and actually making that the ground, the very starting point. So yeah, I won't say anything, but please, Tim, that's maybe, I think you were going to frame it anyway. I mean, I'm just stepping over your feet now. Yeah, I'm a bad interlocutor already. Oh, dang.
No, there's something important in this relationship that we've had spread over a decade. I remember you attending one of the very first colloquies, and I'll talk more about colloquies in a minute, at the house. Jan was here, Helen Marzoff was here. And I can remember you talking about your concern for your students. Like they seemed caught emotionally and sort of entrapped in this kind of house of anxiety and despair. And I was really struck by your focus, and the compassion that it showed, and a very insightful compassion, sort of thinking from the subject out rather than imposing. Yeah. So yeah. So I've seen you as a colleague in the cause, and
Yeah, thank you, Tim. And I just want to say, you've been such a support. I know this about you, that you've supported so many writers, up and coming writers, established writers, in their practice. And that is something that you're doing right now, as navigating this new sadness with groups of writers and artists and
yeah. I mean, I felt my own despair. I felt my own anxiety. I feel it daily. But I also feel a call as a writer and as a thinker to probe more deeply in, maybe not to climate change itself. I mean, I'm not a ecological scientist by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just a a kind of walking around fool on that. But seeing people caught in this trap, and definitely wanting to do something about that. And well, as you know, I have my thoughts on what might be done. I'd like to, Charles, that was a fabulous introduction. It was just really good, detailed, and comprehensive. And but I would like to add something to it. I think that thinking is not ethereal, or it's not even from spirit.
Mhm.
It it has a larger substance, a more palpable substance, and for me, that is the place where I am.
Mhm.
Um, it's true that I live in the Boker Creek watershed, but I can narrow it even more and say that I live at the base of a small mountain, a Victoria version of a mountain that has multiple names. It of course has its colonial name as everything in this fine dominion of ours has a colonial name. Hudson Bay factor. Uh, I don't know, pirate. I'm not really sure. In it is it is a soft border um, between the Lekwungen and the Wasanich nations. By soft means there was a lot of moving back and forth and celebrating on the mountain. It's a Camas um, uh, mountain. It's Gary Oak Meadow, and it has two names in Senchothan. One name is Wamiathan, which is a place of the deer, and that will take you up to probably about the third cliff on the mountain. And past that, it's called Snakka, which means that can be translated as snow mountain. So and it looks, if you know Victoria at all, you know that if you look north and west from Snaka, you will see Pakulse, which is just a little bit more mountain-like than Snaka. But Snaka's quite wonderful in the mountain category too. Uh, and Pakulse means uh, white pointed thing. So I read these two names, these Wasanich names, as late glacial names. I mean, so these names are thousands, 12,000 years old. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So do we want to talk a little bit about Numinous Seditions?
Well, yeah, I know. I'd love to, and I just maybe I could just, Tim, if you don't mind, comment on, I think, the significance of what you just offered there, which was a recognition of yeah, many of the enabling practices that you've brought to the table here that are really on display in Numinous Seditions, and it starts from your, which has been a complete through line in all your work for decades, this drive to to search for autochthonicity, to be autochthonous,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
grounded in the place
Yeah.
you are. I mean, of course, such a going home, how to be in the world as if it were home. There's so many lovely living in the world as if it were home. There are so many
Yeah.
sorry, yeah, so many lovely examples of this. And this has been this through line here, and you have to, that I take as really significant in your work, and I think it is very much the same sort of philosophical eros, perhaps, that drives you in articulating the new sadness in Numinous Seditions. It starts from a recognition of cultural poverty, cultural, intellectual,
Oh man.
spiritual poverty, and these are your words,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
of settler society overall. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so you had already started to acknowledge this in what you were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
just a few starting points. Yeah.
I, I had this I grew up in Regina, and I was in the Jesuits and all over the place. And I was for a time in Africa with CUSO, um, and in 1990, I and my then partner, well, post-Jesuit, um, moved moved to Saskatchewan. I moved back to Saskatchewan, and very early in that move back, I had this very unsettling experience that haunted me for years and continues to haunt me, although it seems less menacing. Seems kind of like a friend. I was just leaving the Regina Public Library, which is a beautiful, beautiful library in downtown, and it faces out onto Victoria Park. And I had this sense that what was around me, the city, the Saskatchewan Hotel, the Sask Power, was simply floating maybe a couple of inches off the ground. There was a big storm rolling in. I don't often have these experiences, but I certainly did standing on the steps of the library. There were some indigenous people in the park, and they in my mind moved as if they just came from the ground, came from here. But everything else, everything kind of European-y, Canadian, it was almost like it had a wish for elsewhere, for being elsewhere. And you could see it in its architecture. And it suddenly struck me, and this sensation of failure persisted over the coming months and years, that I didn't know how to be where I was. I didn't know how to be where I had been born and grew up. And I didn't know the names for any of the plants, just as a start, or for any of the places, or for anything really. And I was shocked, and I was ashamed, frankly. And so because I have a kind of panicky nature, I started to look for people who could help me on this. And what could help me? What in institutional philosophy could help me? Nothing. In the churches, nothing. I mean, so I was kind of lost. And I realized that and through reading George Grant, I ran across the word autochthonous. I realized I mean, I was just half a person. I just said, like, a thinker is not, it's not spirit, it's spirit in a place. Um, so I set out to try to climb that particular mountain, and I'm still working on it. I think that one thing that has been very helpful for me, I did another place change when I came out to Victoria in 2004, I think it was. Further alienation, even more profound alienation, actually, from the land. And what caused me to turn a corner on that, and I'm not claiming autochthonity. In fact, I'm of two minds about whether it's possible for people like me. I mean, I can approach, but can I arrive? I'm not sure. And it's not for ill will. I mean, arriving would be the best possible thing. But anyway, what helped me turn the corner a bit and feel less alienated was I ran into a remarkable man who I'd known for many years but had never actually met. We communicated through letters and whatnot. Called Philip Kevin Paul, and a poet and a Saanich man, a knowledge keeper or a language keeper, and as the Saanich people say, Salwen, which means wise guide. He doesn't like it when I call him that. He says that he's not, but he has been for me. And we just used to hang around talking about hockey and whatnot, and going out for the odd beer. And one day he said to me, "Would you like to learn Sanchothan?" And I said, "Yes, I would like to learn Sanchothan." And if you know the Coast Salish languages, you know that they ask the mouth to do things that a European mouth has difficulty doing. Uh, uh, but anyway, yeah, yeah. So learning the names for things was extremely helpful. It brought a kind of intimacy into this I'm there and you're there sort of thing. And yeah, I think, and in your my answer to your question, Cary, is going on, but I'll try to round it off. Um, I think that our language, English certainly, but I suspect all the European languages, is impoverished around the topic of pansentience. I can think of Canadas, Elan Vital, Bergson, um, but that doesn't get us far in, really. So to knowing place, to knowing the nature, the plants, the animals, the birds. Um, I think this knowing something of the indigenous names for the place and what happens in the place. This creates intimacy, a kind of rudimentary intimacy. I think that knowledge into what is here, where I am, and what is there, where you are, is through need and poverty, and through gratitude. Um, I mean, there is a ceremony in the Wasanich world around the first salmon, and the children go around. I've never been at one, but I've had it described to me. Go around and dance, and they hold the dorsal fin in their mouth, and they say, "Tsewan kwanangatewa tango sasen." Look at me and be merciful. I am poor. And so this is not this is knowledge, but this is not sanctioned knowledge within Western institutions, church, university, etc. Um, yeah, so nothing. I can't think of anything that would be fail-safe to draw someone to autochthonicity, but things like this can be very helpful.
Thank you, Tim. Maybe I'll try to respond to some of that. I really like what you started with there, recounting that moment that you write about when the Regina in Going Home, where the Regina Public Library appears to you as floating off the ground, and just following that, you have the phrase. It became clear to me over the next several months, and as George Grant sharply suspected, that my discomfort, which only grew, had every sign of being irredeemable. And I think sort of that recognition that there's possibly no way out of this has been an important through line in your work. Also behind the book that we connected over initially, which I have all the books around me, surrounded around the larger conversation, contemplation and place, where you, in this sort of, I think, crucial moment, responding to things like the TRC movements, like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, calls for reconciliation, you make the point, the argument, the plea that we are only at best in a stage of pre-conversation in terms of whatever reconciliation might mean between Indigenous peoples and settlers. on this land, and that this fuller conversation may not be achievable.
Let me add, please, that this is not a sign of failure.
Yes,
This is a this is a sign of a starting place.
exactly.
This is where we can start. And
and you said this here. This is a rudimentary intimacy. This is the necessary basis for any kind of eros, which is another important concept in your work. This recognition, and I think, honestly, for myself, I connected over your work because of this, because there's been very simple recognitions in my own life here in Vancouver that were exactly of this sort. One so fundamental that I think would connect with everybody who's familiar with the city of Vancouver is the dual names of the Lionsgate Bridge, the Lions Mountains, and the sisters, the twin sisters. How there is this story of that, there's a symbol of the monarch, or the British monarch, through the lions, and there's also this long-standing story about twin Squamish sisters who married twin Haida brothers, entered an intergenerational feud between the nations, and effectively ending an intergenerational feud between the nations because of the advocacy and the political acumen of these twin sisters. And again, not a mythological story, a story that happened in the distant past with people who have direct relatives to these events and these occasions. And I learned from teachers, that there are these stories, and I learned from books like Pauline Johnson's Legends of Vancouver, that these stories existed side by side. And somebody would be like, oh, it's the sisters and it's the lions. And when you slowly start to realize these basic incongruencies, the feeling is a painful feeling. Ultimately, it's a sadness. It's a type of sadness. It's the sadness of not knowing where you are. Living next to mountains, rivers, streams, where this erasure has occurred. Where these names have been silenced in various ways, and to confront that is crushing. But again, like you say in much of your work, it is the start of real thinking, whatever that might be. So yeah, I've other places, but yeah, maybe you have something you want to say. I'll shut up.
Yeah. I think there's a tremendous amount of work to be done. It's a work of retrieval, and it's almost, I would say, it's all contemplative work. It is. I'll I'll tell you another story. This involves Louise Half. I hope everyone knows who Louise Half is, sometimes called Sky Dancer. She is the first Indigenous poet laureate of this country. And she was a hell of a good poet laureate. Uh, she and I were giving a joint lecture in Saskatoon, just around the time that Contemplation and Place came out. And she said, and she says in this new book of hers, Wit Tell Them, on a life of inspiration. It's excellent. I strongly recommend it. It's truly a great book. I mean, in my opinion. She had this a big book of cave art that she passed around to everyone in the room. It was a huge auditorium. And she said, go back to your ancestors. Go back to what they were doing. Go back into your lineage, your wisdom lineage. And this is something I've been trying to do over the last multiple decades. Plato, Neoplatonism, Christian monasticism, etc. The tradition that's I guess closest to me, and you would think what an odd way to respond to the climate crisis. To go back to these writers like uh, John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, etc. But this has been my way because nothing else would teach me, nothing else that I could place my hands on would teach me contemplative depth. Um, so that's where I ended up.
Yeah, and I think this is another interesting aspect of your work that connected with me. That was always something of importance to me. That it comes, I think it does come back to, yeah, a line of maybe a particular history of Canadian writing that goes back to people like George Grant, that you build on here. That yeah, that we need to draw from diverse we need diverse resources in order to address this fundamental rootlessness. And some of those resources have to be from our dais, if we're settlers, if we're settlers of European descent, like you are speaking to in much of your writing, then there has to be something, we have to retrieve something from these traditions from which we are a part, you know? So I see that as, I do see that as really important work. And yeah, it's what takes you to Plato and the Neoplatonists and all these people you're speaking to, and also other Abrahamic traditions, Jewish philosophers, Islamic philosophers,
Yeah.
are all important in your work, in various ways. I've several places I want to go here, but maybe we could say something about your first. I've always found this very intriguing. So there is a chapter in Numinous Seditions that I think people here would be. I'm switching gears a little bit. That people would be intrigued about. The third chapter on contemplative pedagogies. It's specifically oriented towards practices. Practices that where we can do this work, and you've often spoken to what you call contemplative huts, lavras, these places where you can meet and study with others in a kind of in an intimate way. And I see this, developing intimacy is an important way of coming at this sort of knowledge. And you say these huts, these study groups, these reading groups,
Yeah.
no more than 5 people usually.
Right. Right.
Do you want to speak to these sorts of things, these sorts of practices?
Well, I think we not only have to do research and retrieval research, and this is not intellectual. I mean, this goes through our skin and alters our lives. This sort of research. But it's very important that we talk to one another, and especially in this time of anxiety, that we talk to one another, and we just let it all come out. I'm involved in 2 groups, and my involvement in these 2 groups grows out of a class that I taught at the University of Victoria. I don't know, 2020, something like that. Called writing into climate change. I taught in the creative writing department. People just wanted to talk about the personal agony that they were going through, unrelenting anxiety, despair. They just wanted to talk. They didn't suspect that a cure was possible, but talking was helpful. So in the last few years, I've gotten involved in two groups, which vary in size from 5 to 3. And we meet weekly or every second week in the case of the other one. And we engage in group lectio. We read through most of Plato. I think I'm wrong to assume that people know what lectio is. So yes, okay. So lectio divina is a form of reading that is non-analytic, that is affective, that is epiphanous rather than conclusive. It's being pierced by a phrase. You don't read for comprehension, but you read for the opportunity to be pierced by a phrase. So usually it's a private activity, but we found reading through various texts. Now we've stopped reading Plato, and we're well into Hannah Arendt, who was wonderful. Here's a person who has stared at totalitarianism and knows it well. Yeah, no, I've found that liberating, and the people, the other people in the group report that they find it this way as well. Yeah, we are hoping to be pierced, and yeah, I think that we need an insight into how we can move forward. And the insight does not seem to be available within our reach at this point. And so I'm constantly looking for situations where a crisis imagination could appear. I take this phrase from the American poet Eleanor Wilner, who talks about this outlandish, beyond bounds imagination occurring in times of crisis. She talks about Whitman as being an example of that. W.B. Yeats, Blake, obviously. Yeah, so our openness has a kind of telos, a hopeful telos, that some shards of this will appear. Yeah.
And that's so this method of retrieval and the accompanying practices and pedagogies that go with it, like Lectio Divina,
Yeah.
and like these kinds of reading groups, these study groups that you're describing. Yeah, no, that is fascinating, because I think it starts from that, and the kind of crisis literature that you are turning to, you might call it, in Numinous Seditions, Holocaust literature. You're very inspired by the book is very inspired by Damasius's the last headmaster of Plato's Academy, who's sort of confronting, as you point out, the dissolution of the Greek city-states as he knows them, the end of this illustrious school, academy, and all he can do in the face of this pan-cultural dissolution, as you say, is collect shards, collect fragments of wisdom.
Yeah.
And that's just fascinating. And I'll just say before you respond, that's, I think, what connected us too, is I saw this in your writing, and how you supported this with the writers you knew and the students you knew, and it's just a part of how you live and exist as a writer and a poet. And I was just sort of beginning to do this organically as a young teacher, where some sort of climate change event would happen. Some students, not all students, would want to speak about it, and those conversations would spill over the class, and we would all of a sudden have 4 or 5 of us meeting after class to talk about something, and it does emerge organically, and that was, I think, something we connected over early on. So anyway,
Yeah.
That practice is fascinating. Retrieval. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It, I had an appetite for a deeper life, and the only access to that is some form of practice, uh, that 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 is wealthy, that has a history, uh, and a depth. Um, yeah.
And then maybe Tim, I don't mean to interrupt, but maybe this is why most pedagogies, most education, most responses, most conventional responses to climate change, the climate crisis, whatever we call it, are not going to be adequate from the perspectives that you and I are trying to speak to here, because they don't start from actually an acknowledgement that loss is upon us. They start from a place that uses hope, discourses of hope. You speak to this. I think one of the only people I think who speaks to this well in contemporary writing that I've come across, that hope can be used to obfuscate the emergency of the moment, right? I'm putting words in your mouth, but I do think there's this really suffocating discourse of conventional hope, and we have to somehow just step beyond that to even acknowledge the new sadness. Maybe.
How about replacing hope, like a kind of sanguine hope, jejune hope, perhaps, with realism? So if we committed ourselves to a contemplative path, Lectio Divina, communities of sharing, uh, if we committed ourselves to this larger community of life, and saw in it, uh, a kind of capacity for reciprocity between species, uh, this would create a particular life in us and for us. Um, so I think that contemplative practice has political results, economic results, cultural results. It's not going off on retreat, finding your nearest Cistercian abbey and signing up for a weekend retreat. It produces a new world, and a new way of being, and it makes available, at least for me, a kind of novel delight. I mean, there is transformation and there is loss, but there's this wonderful newness. Um, your community is there. It's shrunken. It's these colloquy units. Um, yeah. So,
Yeah.
and this is and this is something that is happening. Community gardens, stuff like that. This is something that's happening. So if we just follow that through, this beats conventional hope, which is, well, I'd say implausible actually at this point. But with a new form of life, a new polis, a kind of new nation, it'll be tinier, but that's all right.
No, that is and I thank you, Tim, for acknowledging that. Maybe I've emphasized some of the more existentially crushing aspects of your work, but there's always this aspect, your point 5 here, making way for the experience of beauty here, and finding this new community, maybe shrunken, this new polis. It is beautiful. And I've been thinking about that too in terms of this book of essays and interviews that I'm wrapping up where I'm trying to think about, okay, we have limited conceptions of growth. Economic growth has to continue 3% a year. Otherwise, we're all screwed. Who knows what would happen if it didn't continue for 3% a year? But you know, yes, we have to acknowledge the limits of these constraining aspects of growth, but we have to see the possibilities of regrowth in collapse, following unraveling,
Yeah.
following loss too, and the beauty of regrowth. What can regrow in capitalist ruin, to cite Anna Singh or mention Anna Singh? I think that this doesn't have to be lumped in with hope, but hope discourse, but necessarily. But you're right. There's something remarkably everyday about it too. It's literally
Exactly.
it's what me, Charles, and Tim, I admire this way. You know, we're very pedestrian people. We walk a lot of the places that we're going to. You know, we walk for hours and hours, and I think that's important. Like running into people, running into yourself, walking, slowing yourself down in all these ways. Community gardening, like you're often speaking about, playing music with friends, making food with friends, making art together. It's remarkably everyday and ubiquitous.
Yeah, exactly.
All these activities and all the beauty in it too is remarkably ubiquitous.
I think we should readjust what we imagine the center to be. The center is not U.S. politics. The center is, well, there are a variety of centers. There is one of the centers is the restoration, the retrieval of stories in the Wasanich Nation. This has been going on for, I think, the last 4 or 5 years. The elders meet every Tuesday, and they bring patches of story together, and um, uh, and then they translate them into Sanchothan, and then they translate from Sanchothan back into English. And a book is slowly forming. In fact, I hear that it's quite close to being done. That's the center. That's the center. This is the beautiful thing that is happening. Um, I don't suppose I could show it to you, but there's a story that maybe I can. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but this is the story of Raven, uh, Squata. That's Raven's name, and this is the Sanchothan, and this is the English. Oh, you can't see it. I'm sure you can't see it. But anyway, this 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 is central. This is what importance is. Um, these small colloquies lasting. I mean, the Plato Hannah Arendt colloquy group has been going on for about 4 or 5 years, and for all of us, it's life sustaining. Frankly, I mean, we've gone through deaths in families. We've gone through outrage of around toward ICE. Just the frustration coming out of trying to develop exercise a contemplative pedagogy in a contemporary post-secondary. Um, yeah. So our idea of what is important, our idea of center. This is what commands our attention. This seems to be important.
Yeah. I mean, I love what you're saying about, yeah, all this retrieve, this work, patches of story. That's such a lovely metaphor, lovely phrasing. You speak here in what you shared with me, and you said it earlier, the retrieval work that comes from, you spoke about the retrieval work earlier that comes from our own, if we're settler, European diasporic traditions. You also talked about the retrieval work that comes from a deep engagement with what our indigenous nations have to teach us.
Yeah.
And this you said is retrieval work from the Upper Paleolithic, the early Neolithic.
Yeah.
Uh, this is an ancient wisdom. The wisdom, say, of the pan-indigenous North American stories of the Great Flood, right, and all the complexities of regrowth after a massive flood. Um, um, this wisdom is spread. And you say the healing required in philosophy comes from a freed, acute imagination, a numinous sedition from philosophy as a way of life. And yeah, and you've articulated as this smaller world that we have to enter. So just wanted to comment on that aspect of the retrieval. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's lots of work to be done. Lots of work, colloquy work, writing work. Uh, I think poets have had a hard time in these times. Much of the contemporary North American lyric uh, comes from Romanticism, uh, not directly, but through, zigzaggy Romanticism, and Romanticism seems to be killed by climate change, like that ideal. Um, so finding a way to speak as a poet in these times is difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'd love to open this up shortly to all the people here and everything, but maybe on that point, Tim, I know your writing is transforming at the moment, and you have been sharing some of this with me and others, of course. And it is becoming more. I don't know, like, yeah, I think you used the word raw. I mean, that comes to mind.
Yeah.
It has a rawness and maybe you could just comment generally as somebody engaged in poetics on this search for new poetics um, in this time and what is challenging about it, because I do think, like, even people who are not poets, I think we challenge we are challenged right now in naming the world, in giving in sort of articulating what we're feeling. We're at a loss for words. I feel this in many senses. It's that we, yeah. So maybe you could just speak to this in some way.
Yeah, I'm working on a new book. It should be coming out in the fall with M&S, and it's called "The Volcano's High-Held Snow Note." And in it, as I was writing it, like kind of the initial pages of the poems that became some of the initial stuff, um, I wanted a rawer voice. I I wanted a kind of torn voice. I wanted a voice that could never get enough air, but that periodically would get enough air and that would shoot along. Um, it's a compuncted voice. It is a voice that is uh, lost. Um, and when I read it now, as I'm having to read it, as it goes through copyright and whatnot, um, yeah, like a kind of, I see a kind of, um, it's awkward to say this, but a kind of honesty. I mean, maybe not in what the poems are saying, but how they're saying it. Yeah. No, writers, the poets I know are having difficulty, and um, yeah, like how to sing in a post-romantic world.
Mhm.
Like how what is the lyric of a post-lyric world? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
no, that's so lovely. Sorry. Yeah.
I was just going to add something that I didn't have to add. Yeah, no, I mean, the people I'm reading now, Peter O'Leary, American poet, Don Demansky, um, Don's a genius poet, one of the greatest Canadian poets ever. He passed away 2020. Karen Soley uh, just won the Governor General's. Kinesia Lubrin, she's extraordinary. Kinesia, extraordinary. And Robert Duncan, the great American poet, says that poets are the devotees of the assemblage. They want to breathe in the scent of the flower as deeply as they can. Devotees of the assemblage.
I love that. I love that. And you speak about in poetry and phenomenologies here as sources of courage and imagination expansion is the words you use. And those authors, I think, I mean, the ones I'm more familiar with seem to embody that. I can see this courage, but I think you're right. There's this sort of flattening. There's something very flattening about the time we're in, and our search for these. Probably because I would say beauty, eros in all its various forms, has been flattened by I don't know, something to do with something to by like a kind of technocratic, everything turning into something a very consumptive reality that we live in. The realities of living in a society where everything's for sale all the time.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. But there's always room for eros. Always. It's always there. It's always there. Dionysius is always on patrol. Yeah. So this is extraordinary and beautiful. You know, I mean, we are anxiety laden. I don't know about your friends, but the people I know are all what we talk about a lot, more than perhaps we should. Um, I was wondering if this experience of anxiety is not, in fact, an experience of catanixis, which is an old word meaning a blow of remorse. And I think all of us have had this kind of moment where we just think, "Oh my God, how could I have done that?" Like, and it's a life-changing moment. Could this be catanixis? And if it is the beginning of a contemplative life. It starts at that point. It's not the only point of entry, but it is definitely a point of entry. So, with people in their anxiety, in a sense, they are on the way. They're on the way to this new life and this new you. But maybe people would have questions, maybe.
Yeah, let's. I'm glad. Thanks you, Tim. Yeah, Charles, and I don't know if you want to say anything, but we can just perhaps open it up to the lovely audience. But I'll let you moderate, Charles. You're the chair. Sorry.
Yeah, no, this is great, Cary. So questions are open. If you would prefer to put a question in the chat, feel free to do so. Jeannie and I will check the chat, and so we'll bring those questions forth if you like. But the floor is open, so please, anyone who would like to ask a question, somehow indicate, raise your hand, either digitally or use your hand, and we'll acknowledge you.
Claudia.
Hi. Thank you so much for the talk. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to reading more of your work. I guess I'm really struck by this. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm really struck by this notion of the poets having a hard time right now and sort of the death of romanticism. At the same time, it makes me kind of think about poets who've been embedded in and written about genocide for quite a long time. So maybe not ecocide, but genocide. And I'm thinking of someone like Paul Cézanne, for example, and the way, his truncated kind of writing and his, the black milk. And I'm wondering, the sources and resources in Holocaust poets like Paul Cézanne or other poets writing about genocide.
Absolutely, absolutely. Or people like Dorothy Day writing in the Great Depression. Yeah, I mean, there are models, uh, but I mean, you will see um, how pared back the language is among the Holocaust poets. I mean, the shock exists in the smallness of the language that is barely coming to language. Um, this is heading in a different direction. Jan Zwicky has just published a new poem called "Say It." And
Yeah, Tim, you shared it with me, and I just want to say it made such an impact on me that I made sure to cite it at the end of one of the chapters of my book that's coming out, because we spoke about the Sumas Lake tragedy on the flooding, and I just wanted to say, Jan's like, this is a beautiful poem that Tim, you published it through your Deer Mountain pages, right? Your press. And just to literally voice, to say the loss that was not really said. I even have like this, just a one line: on Sumas Prairie, BC farm loss documented, 630,000 chickens drowned, 12,000 pigs, 450 crows, no mention of wild animals or plants. And just this list of this act of listing that Jan engages in,
Yeah.
is so powerful. Yeah.
And she wants in this poem to her anger to come out, her eco anger to come out without editing. And we don't often allow us that kind of license ourselves, that kind of license, but she has done it here. Yeah, as she was composing it, her pet name for it was the Horrible Poem. And it's a book length poem. I think it runs to about 30 pages. I don't know what we're at. And it's available through Deer Mountain Pages. There's a website, and if you're interested in.
Somebody in the chat asked to repeat the name. So this is Deer Mountain Pages is Tim Lilburn's press, and it's Jan Zwicky, Tim's good friend, and the well-known poet philosopher. The poem is "Say It." Say it.
I think that I mean, if you look at a current literary magazine, you're going to see poems that could have been written, 20 years ago or 25 years ago, like not maybe thematically, but the language and the style. Um, this new style, this torn style, this porcelain style, um, this I think needs a place to emerge. I don't think publishers are going to be too happy about this. This might be pretty hard to sell. So maybe a new form of publishing, a kind of samizdat. Uh, uh, the time has come for that. Deer Mountain Pages is in part a gift press. Like it has a list of people that we think might be interested in this type of work. Uh, it accepts anonymous texts. Um, yeah, and it's just small books, little books. I think our longest book is 36 pages, something like that. But I would recommend this wiki. There's also a performance of that poem on the Deer Mountain Pages site, two voice performance.
Great. And I see Chris Yakimov has put the Deer Mountain Pages link in there to say it. And also the performance, I think Jeannie has just linked to as well. So that's all. Yeah. People are taking care of the chat. That's great.
Yeah, we followed, like when we launched it in Victoria at Open Space Gallery in January. The performance itself took 21 minutes, but it was staggering. It was emotionally staggering. You could see it in the audience; they were just bent by it, bent like trees in a wind. And so we had a conversation afterwards about it. Like, I'm not going to say therapeutic, but just for people to be able to speak.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah. So this daring and this no there's no muffler on this engine. This is just boom.
Yeah, and I mean the question was very interesting because yeah, you do engage with these Holocaust writers to some extent in Numinous Seditions, and yeah, that is a very interesting comment. It's just sometimes there is such a the very beginning of responding to something is just a coming to language, and now you're sort of speaking to, if we're speaking about the climate crisis, we're in maybe a stage where some of us, some of you, are past this initial just searching for any word to speak to the loss and the tragedy and the suffering, and now you're trying to speak with courage and yeah, that's and honesty, which is hard. Yeah.
Mhm.
So anyway, sorry, I can't see the people anymore. We should get some questions.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
Michael Lang has his hand up, so if you could spotlight him and unmute.
Go ahead, Michael.
Great. Thank you both, Jeannie and Charles, and thank you, Tim and Cary. I think what you've both so beautifully embodied today is exactly what you're suggesting. And here's what I think you're suggesting is the primacy of story, and not just one's own story, but to have that mirrored by other stories, and not just one other story, but many stories. This is what I hear you saying. And Cary's example that he often uses, and you offered some yourself, Tim, both from your Saskatchewan experience as well as the territories that you live in now. But Cary's example of the two sisters versus the lions. And to have both those stories, I think, is really important, because then if we have a sense of what we think the ends of living should be, right, the classic philosophical question, then we can compare the stories. And we can say, well, what ends is this story put? And what ends is this story put? And bring that into the second thing that I think you're emphasizing, which is conversation or colloquy, as you said, in the intimate sense, Tim.
Yeah.
And then that, if I can just extend it a little more, I think that the third piece of it is poetry. And not poetry solely in the kind of conventional sense of it, but poetry in the sense of careful language, often compact language, that allows us to say things and receive things in a way that, again, conventional language doesn't. I've always liked David White's sense of poetry as language against which we have no defenses. And I think your own poetry does that, Tim. And Cary, your own pedagogy and your music does that too, right? These are, I think, other ways of looking at poesis and poetry in that sense. So I don't know if you have a response to that, really. I'm just kind of summarizing what I feel I'm hearing you both saying to make sense of it and give it a shape myself. But you may have some thoughts, and then I'll share a quick story after.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I first started listening hearing you speak, I was still thinking about the poetry and disaster question, and another story came up for me. There's a poet in China called Sichuan, and he is a very, very, very good poet. He's extraordinary, and he has two poetries in his background. He has the poetry that he wrote before Tiananmen, the massacre in '89, and the poetry he wrote after. First of all, he was silent for many years. He couldn't speak.
Mhm.
And the pre-Tiananmen work is, I mean, it's bountiful, it's confident, it's full of light, and it looks like poetry should look like. After Tiananmen, after he came out of his shock phase, he committed himself to writing bad poetry.
Hmm.
He wrote against the expectation
Hmm.
of the party, of the critics, of his readers, and it's raw, it's irreverent, it's not patient with what wastes time. It's very funny. So a commitment to bad poetry. And I
Hmm.
think in a sense, like Zwicky just sort of dropping the reins and letting the horse go, that's a kind of bad poetry move. And I mean that in a good sense. I mean that in a Sichuan sense. Um, yeah, so and that particular generation of poets in China that straddled Tiananmen,
Mhm.
all of them had that pause
Mhm.
after, and then like a new voice coming in.
Yeah. Well, and do the times compel us to break those conventions, even though they may have had a certain usefulness at a certain time, right? To do
Yeah,
that. Yeah. Tim, you and I might remember, and others may know of this too, but there was a wonderful book that I can't remember if it was William Gass or Annie Dillard edited, but it was called Encounters with Chinese Writers. And this was back in the 80s after the somewhat of an opening between China and
yeah,
so-called West. And it was so moving because who were these writers? Well, most of them were poets.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it was people like um, oh
Bei Dao.
yeah, I think so.
Liu Xiaobo.
Yeah, you know it, Charles, I'm sure, yeah, as well, right?
Liu Xiaobo. Is
Yeah.
that what you're referring to?
Is that who Tim's referring to?
Bei Dao is he's still alive and he's still active. He lives in Hong Kong, and they were very interested in tracking him down. By they, I mean the police after Tiananmen, because marchers would walk down where the marches into Tiananmen Square, and they were chanting, "I do not believe, I do not believe," and this is right out of Bei Dao. This is right. Yeah.
Mm,
And he's that first generation. They called them Misty Poets. The party called them Misty Poets
mm.
because they're kind of not completely easily understood. Um, yeah,
Well, I want to yield the floor to others, but again, I just really want to applaud you both for emphasizing these three things as I hear them anyway, about story, conversation, and poetry in whatever way that manifests. And I think that encouragement and what you've done here is such a fine embodiment of it. So thank you both. And it's
okay.
nice to be part of this with everyone else. So I'll
Yeah,
just leave it
yeah.
at that. Other than, this was a quick thing I wanted to say. There's a new book by the writer Ian McEwan called, I think it's called All We Can Know. And it's set in the 22nd century, roughly about 100 years from now. And an aspect of it is the kind of cultural mythology that grew up around this poem that was written in 2014 by a famous British poet of the time, fiction in terms of this, and then how this 22nd century literary scholar, after things like environmental devastation have happened, political and economic devastation has happened, and people are basically in islands in various places around the world. It's so fascinating thinking about this notion of all we can know, and the fact that a poem figures prominently in it and how that manifests as things go on. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. If there's time later, I'll share something else, but I want to yield the floor to others who may have things they want to contribute. So thank you again, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Anyone else?
Well, I'll go. I'll have a question. There's nothing in the chat. If anybody wants to go ahead of me, that's totally fine. But if not,
No questions in the chat that I can see.
alrighty. So
I have a question, but that's okay. Yeah.
oh, go for it. It's okay.
No, go ahead, go. It's okay.
Okay. Thank you. So I have a question. You had framed a lot of how you're approaching things right now in the sense of thinking in place. And I was really curious. I think in my own journey, like I've got to turn the thinking off a little bit more, and be in place, in order to have different kinds of insight that I would when my sort of rationally trained brain wants to jump in and over determine what's going on. So I was curious if you have thoughts in that, like in the way you were framing it, because I did get a sense it wasn't just all thinking and there was much more displacing that, but maybe you could speak to that a little.
Well, I mean, it's the listening of lectio. It's the permeability, the being open, availability. It's questing. It's need for a kind of companionship with the place. I sometimes the animals have not changed. They've been waiting for us to change, and yeah, that and I don't think we enter that world, this world of pansentience, through analysis, through kind of conventional academic discourse. We enter it through a kind of open heart, the open heart of the same open heart as you would find in Lectio.
I'll definitely have a look at that. I hadn't heard of that text before, so yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by that idea of insight, right? Just about how things can just from your body being somewhere perceive. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot for a long time, actually. So yeah, so thanks. I'm gonna pick up that book and see.
Jeannie, I'll just suggest something. One of Tim's works, Moosewood Sandhills, and so many of your works. You speak about how you need to come to different kinds of places differently. Like, I mean, I take that like the way you had to relate to this prairie landscape. You had to literally lie flat on the ground. You had to put your body flat on the ground, and that was your version of Stasio, of standing still, so you could take in that environment. But the way that you had to come at taking in this luscious West Coast environment was inherently different. So maybe you can say something about that.
Well, it was so hard coming here. I mean, I see the beauty and how it's photogenic, but it was very hard to be here, to leave the place where I was. And represented a huge artistic risk. And the first thing I did when I got here is I got sick. I got sick. It's in the hospital, and and someone, a friend said, it's grief. It's grief. You're sad about the place, about the place that you've left. But gradually, I had to find my way. And the place was always welcoming, you know. It's like a bus shelter in Victoria on a rainy day. Like it would be full, but there would be this shuffling, and then there'd be a place for you. So yeah. And then learning some Sanchothan so that I could address the trees and I could thank them. And I mean that I speak Sanchothan every day, but not to a human being. It's to, well, sometimes if Kevin calls, we'll talk a bit, but yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. I
Vic?
think Evelyn had a question. I want to make sure that she's able to ask it.
Okay. We have, I don't want to forget Vicky as well.
Vicky.
Okay.
Yeah, Vicky had mentioned earlier. Maybe we should go Vicky and then Evelyn, I think.
Yeah.
I didn't have a question, actually. Thank you, though.
Oh, okay. Excellent, Vicky.
So thank you all, Tim and Cary and Jeannie and everyone for taking, Charles for arranging this event. It's beautiful to be in this gathering of good people. I know many of you. Warms my heart. So I want to maybe start where we ended there. I guess my question has to do with two understandings. I'm a Métis, Red River Métis scholar, indigenous to the northwestern Ontario. And coming to BC, I understand what it means to come from away and understand what it means to awaken a relationship to another place. But my question has to do with the last where we just ended. And I would have used two words. One is wording, and the other is worlding. And indigenously understood, I understand that language and story is worlding, that it is a very clear teaching that our way of being is profoundly gifted to us from our relatives. That our job as Anishinaabe, the people, was to receive the teachings of the created beings of the world as they are given. What has happened is that we have had another worldview overlay those teachings, and so we have this particular experience. Many of my students talk about it as cultural discord, that they feel that when they encounter Indigenous teachings, they feel profoundly that they've been living in a state of cultural discord. And I think it's because they have this moment where they have experiences of worlding, and what that is offering. Indigenously, the word holds the image of the teaching that is gifted by the being. And so the words are images. They hold, and I know you know this because you speak the language, they're like images of the teachings of the being that is offering those, that has worlded in language. That's very different than how we word the world, respectfully, and where we are contemporarily. So often what we have in our experiences is a wording of the world rather than a worlding of the world. And Leroy Little Bear would say, what's an identity crisis when the land no longer knows you? Or when the tacit infrastructures of being human are so foreign from the land in which one is, as Haudenosaunee scholar, Longboat suggests. How long will it take our imaginations to naturalize to this place? How long will it take that the tacit infrastructures of our understanding and our sensory organism are aligned with the teachings of the place? And so what I perceive in a lot of the conversation today is this recognition of the overlay, I guess, of wording over worlding, and the conceptualizations that come with the particular various ways of the, whether it was knowledge imperialism that went into commercialize it, everything, we just, all these waves of colonization, we call it. There's other ways to talk about it. So my question is it not, respectfully, the sadness is a realization that we are adrift? That the sadness is in our world, in my teachings, creator tapping on shoulder and saying, excuse me, have you received the teaching? Are you available to the teaching? Can you transform your way of being to allow the teaching to arrive? And so I invite my students to become like abalone, because abalone is translucent to the light as given. And I think that we've misunderstood what the contemplations of our souls is about, respectfully. And I'm wondering what you're thinking about that.
I'm very grateful for what you have said, and worlding versus wording, and they are in conflict. Yeah, I think it's doesn't it have an effect on doesn't it have a political effect and a psychological effect to live in a place that is completely filled with colonial names? Like, isn't that like putting your hand into acid? I mean, that's
Well, I think it's harder because, the relatives are watching us and they're wondering what the bleep, don't they notice us?
yeah, exactly.
Don't they like, excuse me, where are you guys? Respectfully. That's what I experience when I go back to the land and I got to kind of wash off, like Jeannie says, tune my instrument to be present. The full throttle of it is that I'm available to them when I'm not dashing around. And I guess a lot of the politicalness is a relation, are not attending to good relations, both humanly and to the more than human, in the most profound ways. And I understand that. I guess the question is, when you're talking about poetry as politic versus poetry as poesis, they're quite different. They have their own intention and gift, but they are different.
Poetry for me is it's so elusive. It's and you start doesn't matter how many poems you've written, you start in absolute poverty. Nothing may come of this, and it's agonizing. And then a phrase appears, could be terrible, but you're going to hold on to it. Another, then they might want to dance with one another. They might have something to say to one another. Language sometimes has its own spirit that is not my spirit. I see someone new has joined our call. A cat.
Sorry for the interruption. Yeah, Blanche here. She's an 18-year-old cat, and she's hungry now. So she's reminding me. Sorry, Vicky.
No, it's all good. It's all good. The relatives are important.
Yes, as we've been saying, absolutely. Thank you so much, Vicky. I'm just mindful of time. It's just after 5 o'clock, and we had said we would go till 5 o'clock. I want to thank, of course, Tim and Cary and everyone for participating. As Jeannie mentioned, we will be making this recording available after Tim and Cary have reviewed it. And so we'll have that available for everyone at some time in the future. Jeannie, any last words from you?
I just want to thank the community for coming together and being part of this. That, all of this happens because you're here. And I love that we're able to do it, even though we all can't be in the same places. But we have a very common sense of purpose, I think, in some ways, and of being together. So I want to thank our two guests for enriching all of us. And I would really like to thank everybody for coming as well. So with that, we'll sign off. We'll be in touch. Hands raised, Coast Salish. But just appreciating all of you. And take care. And we hope to keep seeing you. You will continue to be invited to everything when you come. So we'll look forward to seeing you again.